All right, let's start our meeting. Thanks for being patient as we had a couple board members with some unexpected delays. All right, this special meeting of the Board of Education for May 19th, 2025 is called to order. All items being considered this evening are posted on the PPS website under the Board and Meetings tab. This chair is being streamed live. This meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 20 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. All right, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for taking your time out of the day and caring about public education. Before we get started, some housekeeping reminders. We ask that... Oh no.
This is a trap area.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully everyone's okay. As I was going to say, make sure, please keep the aisles clear for safety reasons. And if you have displays, signs or banners, please keep them at chin level below so the people behind you can have a wonderful experience as well. Please treat each other with respect, everybody. And thank you again for being here. All right, first up, we have a pretty full agenda this evening. Before we approve the budget for the 2025-26 school year, we'll get an update from Superintendent Armstrong, have a first reading of proposed changes to the student representative and district student council policy, and also get an update on our middle school redesign. I am purposely reading this very slowly. All right. Yeah, I'm just reading the introduction very slowly. Sorry, my mic is still on. Superintendent, whenever you're ready, could you go ahead and give us your update?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a quick update. There's no slides for this, just I know that there has been lots of questions around our progress with the Center for Black Student Excellence, and so I just wanted to bring up a quick update, just a couple of points. And so what I wanted to make sure that you all knew is that for the Center for Black Student Excellence, we have an appraisal that is due back at the end of this week, so Friday, May 23rd. And then once we receive that appraisal, we'll be able to continue negotiations and determine what the next steps are for the board. And then also the director position for the Center for Black Student Excellence will be posted tomorrow. And so just really wanting to emphasize our commitment to making progress and that we are excited to move the work along. And we think that some of these actions coming out of this week and on to the next week will get us closer to our goal and your goals as well.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Will we also have, at the same time as you're moving ahead with any sort of negotiation, receive an operating plan and a budget?
Yes, there will be, we'll have a full packet for the board prepared once we collect all of the information. And once a building is, an appraisal and a purchase agreement is determined, we will have information for the board to consider.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is that it? Great. Thank you, Dr. Armstrong, for the update. Next up, we have the board will now vote on the consent agenda. Board members, if there's any items you would like to pull for a separate vote, please indicate that. Ms. Powell, are there any changes to the consent agenda?
We did have one contract removed for Lewis and Clark.
Great. And that will be put on the June 10th meeting. All right. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Director Brim Edwards moves. Director DePass seconds the adoption of the consent agenda. Do we have any public comment? Or typically no. Right. Any discussion? All right. But I think that's for time. I should learn how to turn off my mic. All right. The board will now vote on resolution 7111
Director
through
Wong?
7.
We have someone signed up for public comment.
Okay.
on the consent agenda.
Oh, thank you.
We have Aaron Frazier.
All right. Thank you. You probably know the guidelines. 3 minutes. Yellow light means 30 seconds. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you. It's nice to see you all. Good evening. My name is Aaron Frazier, and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Black Excellence. I'm here tonight to thank the superintendent for her comments during her report at the start of the May 6th board meeting and tonight regarding the district's process for identifying a site for the Center for Black Student Excellence, and to preemptively thank this board for approval of a budget that includes a director for the CBSE. I am also here tonight to urge this body to keep up its progress and keep its promise to this community by publicly identifying a site for the CBSE this June. You all know better than most that every year this district bemoans the same stubborn student data. It's the kind of data that if you only glanced at it, and if you were exposed to it over and over again, might lead a person who didn't know any better to think the problem was our children instead of our system. But for those of us who do know better, like those out in this crowd tonight, we know it's not us. Even when it goes untaught, unrecognized, and unnurtured in K-12 classrooms, we know that Black brilliance and curiosity and innovation are real, and that Black children, like all children, contain an endless capacity to thrive inside and outside of school. And that's not a baseless belief. That Black children can learn and grow and shine has been proven before, throughout time and history, around the world and around this country. In fact, when this district was led by the very man for whom this building is named, Dr. Matthew Prophet, this belief was proven true right here. But you all cannot have his name and ignore Dr. Prophet's legacy. And you cannot have a CBSE director with no CBSE. These are the worst versions of performative politics, of politics that start and end at declarations. And Black folks have never needed or asked for that. What we have needed and asked for is that this district teach our children math and reading in schools that don't simultaneously break their spirits and erode their understanding of how to love themselves. What we have needed and asked for is that after you sit up on that dais and say, we need more from parents and more from the community to really see a change for our students, that you actually take the help that we are offering you to collaborate and improve those outcomes. What we have needed and asked for is that this district be accountable to us and to every other taxpayer in this city by doing what it says it will with money it has collected, instead of just making us promises when it is politically expedient and breaking them when keeping those promises is not. We don't expect you to do this alone. We are here, you can see us, and you say that you hear us. Now we need you to listen to us too. Please publicly identify a site for the CBSE before June's end. We all know that a physical site for the CBSE alone isn't enough, but we also know it's a necessary first step on a journey that will transform the educational experiences of students in this district, and thereby transform this city and set an example for a country that desperately needs one for generations to come. Together, we really can turn Portland into one of the best places in the country to raise Black children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's everyone on the list? All right. All right, thank you. The board will now vote on resolution 7111 through 7115 and 7117. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. All opposed? Abstentions? All right, the consent agenda has been approved by a vote of 5-0. All right, next up, we have the first reading of a proposed revision to the Student Representative and District Student Council Policy 1.20.012-P that was referred out of the Policy Committee meeting. Director Brynmeier, do you want to introduce this?
Yes, so on behalf of JJ and the District Student Council, I'm bringing this forward. This came out of committee with a recommendation for the first reading. Essentially, the changes do two things. One, they changed the threshold for the student receiving credit, And that was something that we had a discussion with the academic staff to make sure that they were okay with. And so that's the first change. And the second change is just changing the representation that is coming from each school. And again, this came as a recommendation from the District Student Council. So two relatively small changes, and we're bringing it tonight, hopefully to get this done before JJ wraps up his tenure.
Thank you, Director Prim Edwards. Yes, so the policy with proposed revisions will be posted on the board website, and the public comment period is a minimum of 21 days. Contact information for public comment will be posted with the policy. The board expects to hold a second reading of these revised policies, which is to be voted on, or which is a vote to approve them on June 10th. All right, next up we have an update on our middle school redesign. I hand this over to Dr. Armstrong.
Great, thank you, Chair Wong. So I appreciate the anticipation that many of you have had for an update on middle grades redesign and the plan 23 through 26. As you know, this has been a district-wide effort to reimagine the experience of our middle grade students. And I just want to note that this plan is grounded in 5 key themes, including racial equity, professional excellence and support, and integrated adolescent supports. It also reflects our shared vision that middle school should not just prepare students for high school, but it should also empower them to become confident, capable, and future ready. Starting off tonight's presentation is Christina Howard, Chief Academic Officer.
Good evening, board directors. We have really been looking forward to this presentation and bringing you an update on middle grades redesign, a topic that's near and dear to all of our hearts. I would like to introduce you to Joanna Tobin. She is our Senior Director of Middle Grades Core Academics and Redesign and the Instructional Resource team, and she's going to introduce everyone else that's here. Thank you.
Thank you. And good evening, and thank you. It's an honor to get to share with you tonight a big body of work, and I want to start off by centering our principals. And this plan was really designed to support our principals. We know we need to do even more around that. And first, we came together a few years ago to really look at what do our kids needing in Portland right now, specifically our 6th through 8th grade learners. And I want to name and also share that this initially came from the board and your ask around that. And so we put a team together representing a wide range of positions and community and schools across the district, including our K-8 schools. Want to name our K-8 schools that also have 6-8 students and our comprehensive middle schools. And we developed a plan that initially was really grounded in the Association for Middle Level Education and their work, their position paper around this, we believe, a successful middle school. Their 5th edition, research-based, also has 18 characteristics. And we really came together to look at what do our students in PPS need now to have similar opportunities in all of our schools. And so that was the initial framing of our work. This plan is really supported, as Superintendent Armstrong named, really in 5 key areas. And these key areas are supported and implemented through the framing of district-wide, simultaneous, and phased-in approaches to provide comprehensive support. Also naming that each school started off in a different place. And so it is very important that each leader is given that flexibility to lead and guide their school through a roadmap supported by our team that you'll hear a little bit more about here in a moment. And so really having the goal of similar experiences, similar opportunities, and also giving leaders that flexibility to name their approach. And so more specifically on our next slide, you'll see the simultaneous year-to-year and district-wide initiatives. I want to note one example that you see there, access to advisory programs. We have that in yellow. I also want to name, it could be green as well. This is an example of an initiative that was really done in partnership with multiple departments, specifically our T-Cell, our Transformative Social Emotional department. I'm thinking back to a moment when Dr. V was leading her team at Beaumont through this and brought everyone in the summer to learn and look at the curriculum and really talk through how do we support our students in this. And so it's really that collaboration with the leader, with the whole team, centering our students and finding the right path forward. And so I want to name that was done in partnership. And so you'll see the simultaneous initiatives in really noted there on that left-hand column, represented the support. What you see there in the colors is how they're supported by the middle grades redesign, prioritized in the year 25-26. You'll see how we'll share more about what's to come. And then also that green notation is really, as I mentioned just a moment ago, to note the collaboration with multiple departments. As you can see, this is a small crew, and so it definitely has been an effort to make sure that we're working collaboratively throughout the central office, site level, and schools, and providing even more opportunities for school level leaders to collaborate as we move through and get this all through the finish line here in the next while. And so with that, I'm excited to pass to our Director of Middle Grades Redesign, Richard Smith.
Hi, good evening. It's nice to be here with you tonight to talk a little about middle grades redesign. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all the people who came before me in this position, Ms. Misha Plotsky and Ms. Anjane Bryant, who helped develop this plan, along with principals and steering committees and a lot of people that came together to make this. So where we've been in the last 2 years, last year we really focused in on developing our 8th grade success teams. This is a team that meets weekly at our 28 sites that have middle grade students, and they talk about student data and how to best support them. We've also leaned heavily into curriculum and instructional practices and how we support schools in that implementation and how we work together with other departments to do that work. Advisory, as Joanna talked about, was a big body of work that last year all of our schools began to have access to. And that has continued in this school year, where all 28 of our schools serving middle grade students have advisory programs that they access at least 75 minutes a week. We continue to provide professional learning, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later in some of our slide decks. So for this year, while we continue those other practices, we also leaned into scheduling quite a bit in supporting our middle school principals in developing a schedule that would be 5 of 7, so 5 periods where the teachers are teaching out of 7, so that they could do that collaborative teaming as well as having expanded access to electives. We also have leaned heavily into our 5th to 6th grade transitions, and we have a very robust program in 13 of our 15 comprehensive middle schools for next year, where we'll have student mentors that'll work with the incoming 6th graders. We've dabbled in the project-based learning, where we've had some teachers engage in that work. And later on, we'll dive deeper into what our middle grades field trips and capstones have looked like, as well as our standards-based grading, equitable grading practices. So I'm going to turn it over to Courtney Garside, who's our program manager for 8th grade success teams, as well as redesign, who will talk a little bit more about our field trips and capstones.
Thank you, and good evening. So in order to create a field trip and capstone experience for every 8th grader, which in some cases means 200 plus students going to a site, it was important for us to develop some district level partnerships so that we could assist schools in the logistics around getting kids out to a field trip. And so as we've created these partnerships, we've really framed it in terms of what is the field experience that the 8th graders are getting, what is the classroom learning that happens before and after that's tied to core content areas, and then what is this portfolio project that can be tied to their 8th grade capstone. And so the 2 examples we have up here are our biggest partnerships. Most of our 8th graders are going on at least one of these, if not both, and that includes college and career experiences. Many of our students are traveling to the University of Oregon or Oregon State University. Those have been our biggest university partners. And we've also established a partnership with the Bonneville Dam that is tied to our 8th grade tribal history, shared history curriculum, where students learn about how dependent we are on dams, what the trade-offs are, thinking about dam removal related to the tribal history, shared history lessons. And so these are a big lift. Like I said, a lot of our schools have a large number of 8th graders. One example is Kellogg last week. They split their 8th graders. Half of them went to the University of Oregon, half went to the Bonneville Dam, and then they flipped. So in 1 week, we got all the kids out there, and they had these 2 really great experiences. Yes. And so in addition to those 2 big ones, we do have additional sites. So we're partnering with about 13 sites at this point, and you can see them on the list. We have the Portland Workforce Alliance, Inline Construction. We spoke about Bonneville. The Hamilton cast that was here for the play partnered with them this year, as well as the Hoyt Arboretum, GMO, OHS, the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education, the 2 universities, OSU and U of O, the Oregon Zoo, and Portland State University. And so for all of these trips, again, there's the field experience, there's the classroom learning before and after, and then there's these capstone products. And it was important for us with all of these experiences that kids are having to have a place for those to live. And so that's where we developed the digital portfolios. And so in addition to the field trip pieces, other artifacts from students' 6th through 8th grade experience, so big projects, big writing samples, are all going into these portfolios that they start in 6th grade. And they will add to from 6th through 8th grade, which will all culminate in a presentation of their 8th grade capstone that really embodies their middle school experience.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump in, and I just want to express appreciation for all of these partners that we've had, that we've been able to develop with. Getting 3,400 8th graders on a field trip and an experience requires a substantial amount of partners, especially knowing that the budget cycle that we're in, being able to have these opportunities outside of transportation costs and some planning time for teachers has been huge to be able to get these students this experience. And we plan to continue that into the coming year. Our last big shift around middle grades redesign is really shifting all of our 6-8 schools, including our K-8s, to move to a standards-based grading model next year. And we've done quite a bit of work around this. As a matter of fact, PPS used to be one of the leaders about 15 years ago in this process of converting, and we just haven't quite gotten to the finish line on it. We're happy to say that we're finally going to get there next year, and we've engaged with our educators and our parents this year on this. We've provided professional learning both to staff and to leaders on what this looks like. We've taken every single course that's in the middle school catalog and aligned it to standards. Yes, that includes Office 8 even. Everything is aligned to standards moving forward. And so what you'll see in report cards is instead of an A through F, you'll see grades like highly proficient, proficient, and other items. And the report card will no longer just be one letter grade. It'll actually look at multiple areas within the subject area to report out to parents. And so this is a shift. Many schools have engaged in part of this process, and we'll be going full in next year on that. And so looking ahead, the key areas that we're going to continue to prioritize for next year are going to be the standards-based grading shift, the transitions to middle school, and additionally pushing that to 8th to 9th, field trips, capstones, and finally those 8th grade success teams. Those are the areas you'll see us lean most heavily in. And with that, that's our presentation.
Great, thank you. Open up to questions. Director Sullivan?
Yeah, you said 8th grade success team. What does that look like?
So the team meets weekly to talk through students who might be on.
This is the teachers.
The teachers, yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right, got it.
The team meets together in one of their PLC or teaming blocks to talk through student protocols on where students are maybe who are in danger of failing or who are already failing a course, as well as attendance. It's meant to really be those supports within the class and not those out of class supports that we have other resources for.
Director Cass?
Yes, thank you. I had a question about, and maybe it's obvious, is this, so we still have some of the schools in our district that are K-8s? Yeah, so I'm curious, how are those kids pulled out? Are they still experiencing capstone portfolios, standards-based grading?
Yes.
Yeah, just
How does that work in a K-8 as opposed to a comprehensive middle school?
Just like K-8s are uniquely different than comprehensive middle schools in many ways, the approaches might look a little bit different, but the 18 initiatives that we've talked about are absolutely also intended and are being implemented and supported in the K-8s as well. So really centering all middle grade students in the district, 6th through 8th.
Thank you. And just one last comment. I didn't notice in the partners Oregon Trade Women's Network. And I'm a really big fan of that organization because they do have a program specifically for middle school girls to introduce them to the trades. So thank you.
Thank you. We will reach out to them.
Yeah,
You can tell them I sent you too.
Thank you.
that's great.
Okay, I'm gonna call you after me. Thank you for this presentation. Really happy to see this update, especially some of the work that we saw last year and seeing the progress. So thank you for that. Seeing good progress. Just a couple really quick questions. So it looks like the move to 5 to 7 is the goal is to have by next year, right? Or the year after?
We're there now,
We're there now. Okay, and this includes K through 8 as well.
correct.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah, so
Thank
just
you.
to clarify for anyone who is new to that term of 5 of 7, and for the audience, that indicates that teachers teach 5 periods of 7, and so that does allow for that time for collaboration, as Director Middle Grades Design Director Richard Smith shared earlier. Yes.
No, I'm done. Director Slit?
Thanks. So just slightly anecdotally, I have a 4th grader and she has started to panic about middle school already. So I know that that's real, and we've had a lot of discussions about that transition. So it's on my mind a lot. So I'll be like a close watcher for sure of this work. You know, elementary school is like a cozy little security blanket for her. So I do have a couple questions. Some of them are just really basic. You talked about a couple of the middle schools that didn't yet have the transition. I can't remember exactly what you called it. There's 2 that are missing. I'm just curious which 2 they are and if you could remind me what it is that they are missing.
So they did not opt into the web program, is what it's called, Where Everyone Belongs. They have an alternative program that they do in-house at those schools.
Okay.
And so that was at the school's design and school's choice that they didn't do that. They'll still do the Jumpstart, and they'll have their own in-house thing. And I believe that is...
The 2 schools, it's George and Robert Gray. So they had existing procedures and ways of doing their transition work. So they opted out of the training, but they still have all of those things in place.
Can we make sure that after this year with the other schools, we kind of check to make sure that what they're doing kind of matches up and is indeed equivalent? I think that would be maybe a good idea. And then I'm curious, you mentioned the field trips are paid for except for maybe transportation and planning. So is that something that's in the district budget or not?
Yeah, so within our middle grades department, we fund all the transportation and planning aspects.
That's great. And then for transportation, that's paid for by you guys, you're saying? Or, okay,
Yes.
okay. And then the field trips themselves are paid for by the schools?
No, so the school does not incur any expenses for
Oh,
these
okay.
field trips. We incur all the expenses for the planning and the trips, and there are some partners where we might have like an entry fee or something for like a museum. We also budget around that.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's great. As the longtime PTA treasurer, what we pay for our field trips, I know they're expensive. And then I'm curious about the K-8 question too. And not just are they still involved, but also, you know, we're definitely hearing either whispers or downright shouts from time to time from our K-8s wishing that they were not K-8s. Kids in those schools wishing they were at a comprehensive middle school, and I know there's probably the other side of that coin too. And I'm just curious if there's still conversation on, you know, transitioning those remaining 6 K-8s on in this process, or if that's outside this process, or if there's anything we should know about that dynamic.
That would be outside this process. We more support programming and not enrollment or boundaries.
You know, I think I appreciate the question. I just wanted to say that as a new team, a board team, superintendent team, we have not yet engaged in that conversation. And if that's a conversation that the board is interested in having, we will make sure that we get that on the agenda and some things to talk about. But at this point, that hasn't been a part of the work plan.
I think it might be interesting just in evaluating how things are going to see, you know, the differences between the K-8s that we have and the comprehensive middle schools so that we can have some data that might be able to help guide or point out, like shine a light if we do need to have that conversation based on the work you all are doing. Anyway, but maybe not a conversation to have, I don't know.
Yeah, well, one thing I would like actually to add also is that, and this is not for tonight, it's for later, but something to also throw out to the board as well in terms of future discussion about equitable experiences throughout all our middle schools. As you know, we're talking about enrollment discussions and things like that, and also looking at K through 8s, because I know that's been an issue in terms of access to certain programming in K through 8. So I think I just want to flag that as something that I particularly am interested in discussing and having updates on, and throwing that out there as a potential discussion point. So thank you.
And bottom line, just thank you so much for the work. We've all been middle schoolers. We know how important what you're doing is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am interested in the standard-based grading, and I asked for a sample. Do you have one of those to show up? Because it looked like for each class, like for English, you'd have 5 different things, and then you'd have a grade for each one of those. So speaking, listening, writing, etc. Okay, and you do that for every course?
Yes, every course is broken down into larger bodies that give a score for each of those.
Okay. So it feels like that would let parents know more where they were, and if they really weren't doing well, it would say so?
Yes,
Okay.
the intent is that grades are communication, and so it's to communicate more broadly how the student's doing besides just one overall.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, quick question to follow up on that. Is that done through Synergy? And we have adopted Synergy to be able to do the standards-based grading seamlessly?
Yes, it's been a long process, but yes, it does do it. We've seen it live, we've seen it in action, so yes, it does work for that.
Great, thank you.
It looks to me pretty similar. I also have a follow-up on that. It looks pretty similar to elementary school to me. So but maybe a different system. Is that why it's been challenging, or just different standards?
The K-5 system, they enter it separately onto a report card, whereas what we've set up for the middle school will calculate automatically through Synergy.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's fascinating.
Well, it took 8 years, but I'm glad we're here. I'm looking around the room, and I'm just saying, Margaret, Liz, Roseanne, there's not very many people who were here in 2017 when the new board came in and decided that they looked at the inequities between the students who were in the under-enrolled K-8s, primarily, well, I say only on the east side and North Portland, and primarily in schools in which they had less political power, is how I'd describe it. And the board actually said the question is, like, who drives it? The board, with the new superintendent at the time, Guadalupe Guerrero, we decided that if you looked at the inequities, that we weren't going to let it continue, because essentially the types of electives that students had in the under-enrolled K-8s were things like office duty, teacher's aid. They weren't they were not at all similar to the big comprehensive middle schools. And so we embarked on the sort of reopening Kellogg, reopening Tubman and giving it a feeders pattern, Harrison Park. And so there were multiple pieces to it, in addition to more equitable offerings, but also things like field trip experiences, because again, another place where there was inequity. So really thank you for the work to ensure that kids across the board get an opportunity to get outside and experience the world. It's great to see that. There also was just like completely different practices, and while this wasn't a K-8 versus a middle grades, again, the report cards, the standard-based, so my kids went to a standard-based report cards. They went to Hosford when they had the standard-based report cards, and all the kids on the west side still had letter grades. And actually, I found as a parent it was great. because it gave you a lot more information about where your student was. It also attempted to separate effort from proficiency, which is really important. So kids who were trying hard got recognized that they were trying hard, but also not given false information about where they were in terms of proficiency. I think my only comment about the report cards is it seemed like the biggest issue with report cards was not the students, who, like my kids, had no idea because they had standard-based elementary cards. So when they went to middle school, it was just, when they went to Hosford, it was just like the same. But it was mainly the parents who really were still attached to the grades. So hopefully we've done a lot of socializing of what the benefits are, because especially if your child is struggling, I think they're really helpful. But it wasn't so much the students versus the parents who really felt attached to the letters. I guess I don't really have any questions. This is great. I really appreciate it. Actually, I do have a question. The 507, there was some conversation when looking at just the number of minutes then that students had. If you take the core classes over the course of the school year, whether they had enough instructional time to cover all the material at the middle grades. So I'm wondering what you're finding.
I'll take a crack at that, and then the team, if you'd like to add anything, please do. In fact, one of the key pieces that we've needed to make room for is our PE minutes. So we do, in fact, need to provide 3/4 of PE, and our previous schedules did not all allow for that. So 5 is your core classes plus a PE and a health. And so that's an example of making sure that we have room for that requirement while also maintaining the required minutes for our core and also valuing the elective experience that students need in the middle grades. And that is through K-8 as well. A few more challenges presented at K-8 with meeting those minutes and sharing staff and those sorts of things. So you can imagine there was a lot of conversation and support to get there. And I just want to name and center our K-8 principals around that. Definitely the scheduling has been uniquely, I don't know if I'll say challenging, but I think parts of it definitely have been uniquely different than the middle grades with the shared K-5 staffing.
I want to ask, that kind of got at my question. I was wondering, so in a K-8, the entire school's on the same schedule? Or are they from a schedule perspective, are they operating on a 5-7?
Two separate sets.
For 6-8, they're on the 5 of 7, and they interplay because they're using and sharing staff.
Okay.
So just I guess what I wanted to make sure is because it used to be 6, and so when you have 7, that means each class is a shorter period of time. And if we have the same number of days, we still have enough time to cover the core curriculum through the school year, even with the 7 periods, even with advisory, the classes come out to about 47 minutes on average, which gets us past the 225 required per class. Okay, great. I guess the other question I have is, there was, I think, what spurred a lot of the changes was the examination of the types of electives, and not just the types of electives, but some schools only didn't have a world language in middle schools, and others had 3. And I'm curious, and there also was different levels of math that were offered, and obviously with the fewer numbers of students, there were fewer options, and sometimes fewer rigorous options, and fewer interesting, as my kids said, because when they went to Hosford, it was a very low enrolled school, that there wasn't very, the electives weren't very interesting, and there were very few. And so I'm curious whether you all look at all those things, and especially now with the remaining K-8s, because they can't have that, they still have a relatively smaller number of students in the 6th to 8th grades. Mm-hmm. Is that something you routinely look at, or?
Yeah, so in our core program, all middle schools, including K-8s, have to offer at least one world language. So all of our schools do have that in there. Yes, economy of scale, there will be some different elective offerings depending on what school you go to and the number of students that are there. And then for math, we do have a math pathway to where Algebra 1 can be accessible at all schools.
Great, thank you. I'll say it's great, sort of like as my third to last meeting, to see it's on its way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have the 2025-26 budget. Right now, the regular board meeting is recessed. We will now be reconvening as the budget committee. So the purpose of tonight is to approve the superintendent's proposed budget for the 2025-26 school year. I just want to put one clarifying thing for our board members and the public who may have questions. Today is the approval of the budget, which in other words is kind of like approving the acceptance of, or accepting and or voting to receive it, basically. June 10th is when we actually vote on the adoption of the budget, and that's a different vote. So just so you know, today's for the approval, June 10th is for the adoption. The board began, just a little bit background, the board began receiving initial recommendations all the way back in January. I'm very thankful for our superintendent with her practice early and often has been very helpful in terms of seeing and the revisions and the feedback that was used in revising the budget and we had a revision and it was reshared in March before we received the superintendent's proposal in April. Then we had a board budget hearing later that month, followed by a work session. At our last meeting, the Community Budget Review Committee, also known as the CBRC, provided their report, and followed by board questions and board discussion as well. I also want to thank the staff for putting in all this amazing and hard work on getting this together and also answering our questions as we have been sending them in. Dr. Armstrong, I was wondering if you have any thoughts you would like to share before we get this resolution on the table.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wong. I appreciate that, and thank you for the call out that tonight is about voting to approve the budget, whether that's with changes or without changes. And just a reminder to the board that the budget is a ceiling on spending and sets the appropriation levels. And so it's important to acknowledge that, and knowing that there'll be movement within positions and services throughout the year. Like I said, it's thinking about this budget and the ceiling. And then I also just wanted to just call out a couple of things. I know it's been quite the journey since it feels like I've been talking about budget for the entire 11 months. But just thinking specifically of the last few, initially in January, we proposed a budget and we put it out to the community for feedback and review. And we heard strongly, not only from our staff, our community, and those who are in support, and even in some respects from you on some areas. And so I want to remind you of some of the shifts that we made from January through March and April. And so originally we had named a reduction to the high school staffing formula where we were looking to reduce it, and we were able to bring that back to keep it as it is. And so originally we were looking at a $2.8 million savings out of that, but we returned that back to baseline. We also were able to add back from our original proposal interventionists, instructional coach, and social emotional supports. We're also able to add back a 0.5 assistant principal in our elementary schools, and we originally had that named, which was a $1.4 million reduction. And then also some balancing for English language development, knowing that we want to continue to resource in our programs where support is needed the most. And I think it's just also important to note that we made no reductions in special education, even though, there's a cap in our funding and we carry a significant amount out of general funds. We know that the work that we need to do with our kiddos with IEPs is still significant. And most extracurricular activities remain and continue. The other thing I wanted to lift up is core enrichment has been a hot topic since the entire year that I've been here, and I've heard from some of you about that. And so when I say core enrichment, I'm talking about those classes like art and music and in some of those areas. So there's the core academics and then there's core enrichment. And so we are committing to no teachers traveling to more than 2 buildings. And we're also paying attention to those splits that create undue hardships or that might be awkward. And so we're going to continue to explore that and utilize our set-aside funds that were already budgeted for some of those unique opportunities. And the other thing that I wanted to lift up is that, thanks to our voters, we have levy funds that this year we're able to cover or pay for 744 teaching positions, 1.0, so 744 of that. And so next year, for this 25-26 school year, we're projected that those levy funds will cover 718 positions. And we are still continuing to fund unless, of course, there is a reduction in enrollment where we would apply that. But we did not intentionally seek out those positions that were levy funded and eliminate them because we no longer had the money. We still wanted to make sure that that was a funded resource, which is about $4 million. And so I just wanted to lift up those things to let you know that we've continued to work at it. And then I think the last thing that I'll mention is Title I. So we will receive our allocation from the state on Wednesday is what we're predicting. And so once we receive that allocation, we know that there isn't a reduction to title funds. There is not going to be. And so we look forward to getting the remainder of those funds, which is about 25%, back into buildings so that some of those programs and things that were funded before can continue to be funded. So we'll get that allocation from the State Department on Wednesday, and then we'll begin to notify buildings either later this week or next week. So they'll have those funds. So I just wanted to add some reminders and some new information for you to hold on to as you move towards approval of this budget. So thank you for this opportunity to engage.
Can I ask 2 questions just about the items you mentioned? This is just about the things that she just raised. You said the balancing for English language development. Are you talking about for English language learners or students in?
ELD, yes. I was talking about ELD.
Okay,
yes.
Great. And then the Title I, if it's 25% back in, is that going to be an amendment to the budget? And maybe that's a question for Michelle. Or is that, because once we approve, either the fund or the fund amount can't change by more than 10%.
Should we put this on the table first?
Pardon?
Should we put this on the table first?
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, let's put it on the table first. Do I have a
And then
motion?
it's a technical question.
So
That's
moved.
fine. No, I'll call on you first right after.
So moved.
Resolution 7116. We have Director DePass moves and
Second.
Director Split seconds, which is Resolution 7116, Budget Committee approval of the 2025-26 budget and imposition of property taxes. Thank you. Go ahead, Director Brim Edwards.
Right. Thank you so much for all of the attention to the budget. It's such a critical guide for the efforts for the year, and so I just want to thank you, directors, and also the CBRC and staff who have worked really hard to answer so many great questions at a very high level of detail. So just want to share some appreciation for that. For the question about Title I, I think those because Title I funds are included in the 200 funds section of our budget, those additional funds are not enough to trigger a supplemental budget, but you will see a change in our presentation.
board discussion? Yeah, general questions.
I want to do public comment first.
We're going to do public comment first. So, Ms. Powell, who do we have for public comment?
We do. We have Alberto Plata, David Contreras, and Melissa McCoy.
Thank you all for being here. I just want to go over some general guidelines as with all public comment. You have 3 minutes. The yellow light goes off, means you have 30 seconds to finish up. We ask that you keep your comments respectful. Also, make sure that you respect FERPA laws, which is there no potentially identifying comment that could identify any of our students. Great, thank you. Whoever wants to start may go.
All right, thank you. Good evening. So I'm not going to speak today. I actually brought one of my students who's going to give this testimony today on my behalf.
Dear Superintendent and members of the Board of Education, my name is Oscar Cruz, and I am a senior at Benson Polytechnic High School. I participate in Escalera, which is one of the programs that Latino Network offers in PPS. I write to thank you and show my appreciation for allowing Latino Network programs to be offered at our schools. Programs such as Conexiones, Early Escalera, Colegio de Padres, and the program I currently participate in, Escalera. I enjoy being part of the Escalera program because it provides me with supportive space where I feel truly seen, heard, and valued. As a first generation Hispanic student, navigating the college environment has come with many challenges. I've often found it overwhelming and difficult to know which steps to take. There have been moments where I felt lost or unsure, but being part of Escalera has helped me feel less alone in this journey. The program has given me a sense of community and belonging that I didn't know I needed. It has become a safe place where I can express myself without fear of judgment and where my experiences are understood and respected. Through Escalera, I've connected with others who share similar cultural backgrounds and similar hopes, values, and struggles. This is a place where we have someone who looks like us and has had experiences that we can connect to and understand without feeling degraded. PPS should support the community because you are not only helping the community, but you are upholding yourself to a higher standard to improve and invest in our education. These kinds of programs serve as a vital bridge between students, families, and the education system, especially for those of us whose parents didn't have access to the same education opportunities. For first-generation students, this connection is essential, and it helps to close gaps in understanding, communication, and access that often leaves families feeling disconnected or overwhelmed. By investing in these programs, PPS is doing more than supporting individual student success. You're investing in a more equitable and inclusive future. You're choosing to support a system where every student, regardless of their background, has a fair chance to pursue higher education, develop professional skills, and ultimately create a meaningful path forward. Supporting Escalera and similar initiatives to commitment to acceptance representation in a school system where their mission states to educate all children to their highest potential, empowering them to be a productive, respectful, self-reliant, and responsible citizens who value diversity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, board members, and Superintendent. My name is David Contreras Machado, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Latino Network and our community as we face another year of difficult budget decisions. We understand that PPS is being asked to reduce 15% from RESJ in its various programs, a painful reality and a challenging financial climate. But how we choose to make those cuts is as important as the cuts themselves. This cannot be a top-down decision that blindly reduces services without considering need, scope, and quality, and the consistency of program. Longevity, trust, and relationships matter, especially in culturally based programs. Our students thrive not just because of the existence of services, but because the people delivering those services know them, look like them, and can understand them. If this becomes an across-the-board cut, the impact will not be felt equally. Some students, like our Latina youth, will bear the weight of that loss more than others. Last year, the board made a commendable choice to restore funding to the RESJ programs And I hope and wish you do the same this year. But I need to mention that last year's restoration was not used to maintain services for Latino students. The message that sent, unintentional or not, was that our students were not a priority. If even some of those funds were redirected went to support the Latina community, we may not be here today. But we are here because we need to sound the alarm that this pattern cannot continue. We urge you, do not take a blinded approach. These decisions must reflect the lived reality of our students. Our programs represent not just academic support, but trust, identity, and belonging. If you remove those, you're not just removing services, you're removing lifelines. We cannot separate these decisions from the larger political climate. Across the country, Latina communities are facing increased hostility, from rising anti-immigrant rhetoric to policies that erase our history and silence our voice. In this context, pulling back support for culturally specific programs in Portland is not a neutral act. It's a broader pattern of erasure and marginalization. And it sends another message to our students that they can't afford, that being, you don't belong. We believe there is still a path forward, one rooted in equity, thoughtful decision-making. We continue to advocate in Salem to increase funding for our schools, our communities, our districts. We believe that we are ready to collaborate in building a path forward. Together, one that prioritizes student needs, honors the deep connections that make our programs successful. Our students are watching, so let's show them what racial equity and social justice in action really look like. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time today to share. Next up, we have the president of the Portland Association of Teachers, Angela Bonilla.
Hi, busy season. Hi, Angela Bonilla, President, Portland Association of Teachers. I was totally prepared to come here and ask kindly and directly and forcefully that those Title I funds be reinstated to our schools. I know that 25% of those funds were held back in preparation for a possible withdrawal of funds by the federal government. So I'm very happy to hear that there is a commitment to bring those funds back to our buildings, and hoping that those funds can be directed to support staffing in order to reduce the likelihood of layoffs for this year. I'm also very happy to hear the core enrichment being lifted up by our superintendent. It is really awesome to hear an attempt to stabilize and hear a superintendent speak about core enrichment, not just because it's visually and sonically appealing, but actually thinking about the educators who make that happen every day. However, I know that any core enrichment educators who are watching would be upset if I did not mention how difficult it is to teach across 2 sites or more. And I appreciate the attempt to keep it down to 2 sites, but when we speak to the inequalities happening across different schools, like our middle schools, we feel that every day when our core enrichment educators have to travel to multiple sites across the whole system. I've heard about folks not having the same supplies across schools, so having to have additional planning to be able to support different schools. I also heard about scheduling, making them inaccessible after school for events at each site. So if you're only there in the morning, it's really difficult to have after school events for those families. Also seeing that folks are stressed, getting to know hundreds and hundreds of kids across multiple sites and multiple grades and giving them meaningful instruction. And I would also be remiss to not mention that our school counselors are experiencing the same type of tension. Their work is based on building trust and relationships. And we have counselors, for example, that are working 2 days at one site, 2 days at a second site, 1 day at a third site. And you can't really provide care and identify supports or even let kids know how to find you if you're only there 6 to 12 hours a week. I think this is especially painful for our Black educators, our counselors, our Indigenous counselors, and our counselors of color, who sometimes are the only adults of color that kids see in buildings and at their sites and feel like they can connect to. So I would really appreciate making sure that all funds, additional funds that can be allocated to our schools to stabilize staffing and avoid layoffs are made. And I will continue to do the work of shouting at the rooftops in Salem to make sure that our legislators know that there is a check they need to cash for us so that we can provide the support and services and education that our kids deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, President Bonilla. All right, is there any board discussion?
I don't have anything like earth-shattering to say, but I do want to just say a few things as we approve this budget, which really means accept it, taking it from the committee to the whole board. I guess one thing is, I think anybody who's been paying attention to me since I got here knows that I have a background in fighting for school funding. And it is really hard to vote yes on something that we all know is inadequate for our kids. And we all know that tough decisions are being made that none of us feel comfortable with, right? And even though we're all doing our best, and I've been really grateful for Director Morrison, who stepped in and done just a wonderful job of getting where we are now, Superintendent Armstrong, it's not fair being handed this type of situation as a new superintendent, and I really appreciate all the work that you've done too to make this happen, and everyone else who's been pivotal in putting this together. So when I say it's hard to vote yes on, it's not about the work that's been done or the process, but just the reality that our state legislature since the early 1990s has underfunded our schools. Conversations with state legislators this session have not demonstrated that they are interested, even if there was funding. I'm not sure that they would have stepped forward with more dollars for our schools. And the revenue forecast last week was not good. So I don't think it's going to get better, and I'm a little fearful that it could get worse. And so I appreciate the Latino Network and the Portland Association of Teachers and others that are standing up and continuing to fight to at least keep what we thought we pretty comfortably had in pocket before the forecast came out. It's really going to take an effort of all of us reaching out to our legislators and making sure they feel really uncomfortable with making any further cuts to the governor's recommended budget level for school funding. So if you haven't written your legislator lately, it's a good time to write them again and let them know that it's critically important to really keep that pressure on them so that because I still remember 2 years ago hearing from legislators, I never hear from anybody about school funding. And I'm really personally trying to shift that narrative for the legislators in Portland and beyond. So after getting all of that out, I also just want to be candid that it's my first time looking at a budget, and I also want to give a lot of thanks to Director Brim Edwards, who asked a ton of questions, and reading her questions and the answers she got was really illuminating to me and helped me get through a document that was, for me, a little hard to get through as a newbie. I'm looking forward to, hopefully, maybe, we'll see what happens, being part of a cohort that gets kind of the whole training and the whole experience before this next budget, where I feel like I can be a more effective advocate on behalf of our schools and families and kids and staff. And so having said all of that, I remember Director Hollins talking about transparency, and also that it's not just having the light shine, but also making sure people can understand it. So I look forward to working with Director Morrison on that going forward when we have a chance to really do the work together instead of just being off to the races together. Basically, I think we started maybe the same day, I'm not sure, real close. And so I think that'll be a fun process going forward to see how we can really help our community understand the budget and understand getting into the details and take it as a civics lesson that we can have with our families and even our students going forward. So with that, I mean, I'll approve acceptance of the budget and look forward to continuing the conversation, and also just grateful for some of the news shared today that really demonstrates listening and flexibility. And I think overall, the governor issued a really interesting statement after the budget forecast, where she talked about that we all should be considering how to keep our eye on our long-term strategy and not fall into like feelings of scarcity or fear about what's to come. We all know the federal dynamic is really scary and intense, and it makes us in a way want to go into ourselves and protect what we have, right? And be worried about the future. I think that's a form of giving up. I think that's a form of losing before we've already lost. So I hope that we continue to have that spirit of we are going to get what we deserve. We're going to give our kids what they deserve. We're going to give our staff a great place to work, and trying to have that attitude and not cower in sort of fear of what might happen down the road. So I really appreciated that message from the governor, and I just want to continue to share that and appreciate that it seems like you all are also having that attitude of let's not forecast the worst and like wait until it actually happens and then deal with it. It's like finding that perfect balance between accepting the risk, but also finding the hope and strength to endure a tough time. So those are my comments, and I will leave it at that. Not very detailed, but big picture.
Thank you, Director Slight. Those are good comments. Anybody else?
I'm just going to make it short. I have something longer I'm going to say, and I have some questions. But I guess I'm just going to say, this is my 12th PPS budget, and approval has always been approval, not just accepting the budget. Usually we're accepting the budget when the superintendent delivers the budget to the board. That's sort of like the superintendent delivers it, the board accepts it, and then it starts its work. And the approval vote has always been the big vote. Actually, the adoption was sort of the cleanup after, right before the year end. But just to show my flexibility, I'm going to be flexible tonight because I haven't gotten answers to all my questions. But I just want to note, in the past, our approval vote has always been the approval of the budget, and then staff did all their magic, and then we had our TSCC hearing, and then the adoption vote was really just sort of like a sentence on its way.
Yeah, it was really interesting hearing from the experiences from other districts and how different it is across so many. Some places even have the approval and the adoption on the same day, which is interesting. But yeah, thank you for that. Yes.
I just want to appreciate that the SPED, what you shared tonight, that there were no reductions in SPED. And also, I think a lot of people know I'm like early childhood, getting the babies taken care of first, getting the literacy up. And so I'm also really happy to hear that, that SPED is fine and that our Title I funds are also being restored. Also the enrichments, for some kids and many kids, including me, having the dance classes, the stained glass classes, the everything but algebra, I just love the enrichments. I think it's really important to keep that. It says a lot about our district, and we have a lot of history in showing up as artists and creatives here. So that's really important to instill in our students.
Yeah, I wrote something up, and we know that nobody's happy with this budget, and we know that we need more dollars to give our students the education they need and that we want from them. However, I do agree with the CBRC that the budget attempts to spread cuts across most service areas and to protect classroom staffing as much as possible. I was so happy to hear tonight that, Title I is going to come, and of course we want it in the classroom, as Angela said. We've been looking to the legislature for more funding, and I at least was hopeful that at the very least the special education cap would be raised. Now it looks like that might not even happen, since the budget forecast is less than expected, and we also deal with other unfunded mandates, and I think we might even get another one. So that's frustrating. And I would say that we as parents, teachers, board members, staff, and especially the superintendent, have done a lot. And Angela, you and your group, you're always in the legislature, have done a lot to let the legislature know our needs. And I think they've listened, but it doesn't look like they can help us even if they want to. And I feel that unless we get rid of the kicker or pass a sales tax, or hopefully both, it may well be that the legislature will never have enough money to fund schools to the quality education model. And we keep putting all of our eggs in this basket, and it doesn't seem to be working. And we need to do what we can at the grassroots level. Last year, we gave up foundation dollars and are now looking to the Fund for PPS to help. And I think we really have to get behind there, try to fill some of these gaps. We're funded per student, so let's increase student enrollment by highlighting the wonderful things that are going on in our schools and getting the word out. I have been privileged to observe the talents of our students and the dedication of both parents and teachers over the last couple of months. I want to thank the Jefferson Dancers, the Franklin Dancers, early childhood classes at Sacagawea, All-Star Night, the Battle of the Books, Kermes at Scott Elementary, the Book Awards presented at OMSI, and the Heart of Portland for sharing your energy and talent with me. People just don't know what goes on in this PPS community, and it goes on all over. And you know, I'm mostly on the west side. I've been traveling around. I can't believe all the wonderful stuff that's going on. And everybody's just so accepting. So let's look at these things and support our goals that don't depend on the legislature. I've had just in emails, a lot of interesting things come in. Can we increase the school year? Ways to support our kids. Can early release times be on Monday mornings or Friday afternoons so that the week is not so broken up? Do we need to consolidate or close some schools to get the optimal number of students? These are ideas that have come from the community. Let's consider them. I believe that this budget is doing the best we can with what we have. I am saddened that we have had to let people go because of the need to cut positions. I can tell from my emails that these are some of the best and the brightest, and it's so hard to lose them. I thank the teachers and other staff that are making unexpected changes and will do the best they can to make that change work for their students. And although I do not put much hope in the legislature to deliver all that we need, I and others will be going down again on Thursday to plead our case again. So wish us luck.
Michelle, were you going to say something?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so I have a bunch of so I had a number of questions, and I want to first start by thanking staff for the sort of first round of answers I got. And I had some follow-up questions because there were places that I thought were important areas that I felt I didn't get complete answers, or it was a tentative answer. And I thought I was going to have answers before tonight to the follow-ups, but I didn't, so I'm going to ask some of them here. And since now I get I guess you get a mulligan for the adoption for those sports fans or golf fans. But I will ask some of them. I'm going to get them on the record and also just share some expectations that I have. So starting in January, I appreciate there was here's at a high level where our budget is going to be and the types of reductions that are going to need to be made based on declining enrollment, but also rising costs. And those reductions came into two categories. One were school-based and the other were central office-based or more centrally based. And I feel like we had, and there were just general categories. And I feel like from the school-based ones, we got a lot of really detailed information. And I've got to thank Dr. Adams for the heat map, because I think it tells stories about what's happening in our schools and how we're supporting our schools, and allows us to look in terms of equity and what's happening there. So I appreciated the level of detail, because I feel like we're fully knowledgeable about the impacts that the cuts are going to have on our schools. And I feel that the impacts in the schools, I really appreciate that the attempts to lessen the impacts on the classroom. Generally, our class sizes are still fairly low. And I feel like there was a support for equity across the district in terms of making sure kids didn't have different experiences as PPS students. You know, there's some things that distress me about some of the cuts, but we know what they are, and I think to my colleagues who spoke about school funding, we can still go fight for those. So most of my questions really revolve around the more central cuts. And early on, there were some large general sorry, this is a long wind up, but there were long, but I'm not going to ask a lot of questions about the school-based cuts because I feel like we have them, and I really appreciate staff doing as much as they can to support things that I know are important to students and families and staff. So the central office ones, there were some large categories that I feel like we still don't have clarity on. There was, you know, there's several $1 million in the category of professional development, contracts, a lesser amount in out-of-state travel, but it still was highlighted as here's some of the central office cuts. And I asked some questions, and you can feel free to answer, but the answers I got that we wouldn't have details on that yet. And in the past, for example, on the contracts, we knew if we were going to be reducing contracts with either for professional services or with our community-based partners. So I'm curious about the details about the cuts that are going to happen in those areas that were highlighted. There's going to be millions of dollar cuts because I'm not comfortable voting for a budget that I don't know what it is that we're cutting or what services are going to be discontinued or reduced.
Thank you very much for your questions. We have provided a lot of responses to date, and by we I mean administrators as they know the information. And so I think one of the challenges we have at this point in the process is setting that highest level of spending. We've been, you know, running the district this year. We're actively running schools while we're trying to plan for next year, and at the same time taking a pretty significant reduction and reorg to our central office staff. So many of those contracts, all of our contracts are going to be reviewed, including our transportation contracts, different facilities and maintenance contracts, and of course our service contracts to schools. So they're kind of in early negotiations right now. I think part of our challenge is really determining what supports we can still offer as a central office and what we will need to work with our partners on to supplement what is going to be missing next year. And I know that that's not in detail and it's not in depth, but we are, again, setting that highest level of spending with the hopes of being able to be flexible as we move into next year, and really needing to do some renegotiations and communications with our partners about how can we work together differently in a way that helps us both.
So I know early on, like one of the contracts was with Let's Talk that was going to be eliminated completely. I'm curious, there aren't ones that have already been decided. I mean, I'll just say in past budgets, when we were going to reduce budgets, the board knew what was going to be reduced and wasn't always happy about it, but we had a sense versus voting on something and then finding out later we zeroed out this community organization, or we've left in place a contract that has less student impact than some other contracts. So I'm just saying, in the past, we've always had the detail of what, again, what it is that, what services we're deciding.
I do appreciate
to
that.
Deprioritize.
And it has been a transition year for the finance team and our leadership, and working together with Superintendent Armstrong as we approach these changes going into next year. So maybe a little bit behind in terms of details that are available. Early on, we knew that we were sunsetting Let's Talk with another communication platform. So that's why that one was easy to speak to, because we were already planning to sunset it. I don't think it's our intention at this point to sunset anything that we haven't communicated about. It's more about, again, negotiating maybe different ways to work together that would meet the needs of our students and still involve our community partners at whatever level we can fund them.
So in those three categories, do you see that the district, if it can't share right now what those are, what the criteria would be, or the transparency that they actually would be made? I think I'll just speak as somebody who's been around for a long time, that there's always the thought that things that aren't transparent may never happen. And so I'm wondering if there is maybe this question for the superintendent as well, a transparent process by which people will see. So there's plug numbers, so I have it in here, but a couple $1 million for, or I think it's like $3 million for each one of those, or $3 million for the contracts and $2 million for the professional development, and almost $1 million for the travel. That actually, when those reductions occur, that the board would be notified, or that there would be some sort of process by how we prioritize them?
Well, I think probably by means of accountability and a feedback loop, we can track those. Those were early estimates. So knowing that we have implemented a spending freeze, so to speak, that will be in place, where we are very rigorously reviewing expenditures, especially for travel, as they anything that's not directly impacting the student experience. So that's been in place now for a few months. And also kind of a hiring chill, where we're very carefully reviewing positions that aren't directly student facing before we automatically refill them, depending on the work and whether or not it can be redistributed. And I know that Dr. Armstrong has been working with leadership as well in terms of, using data to drive our decisions around our partners and how we engage with them. And that would include student attendance, academics, and participation, frankly, in the programs that are being offered.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to double click on what you said, Michelle Morrison, so I appreciate that. And also just a note that on the onset of this, when engaged with the cabinet team, the request was that they look at their budgets and reduce on the contract area by 10% where possible. Some of our teams were able to go above the 10%, and then in other places that didn't have significant other chiefs or other offices, if you will, didn't have contracts that could be reduced. They were under that 10%. And so when I mentioned earlier about through this budget process and what, as you know, Director Brim-Edwards, what you're approving is the ceiling. And so the budget that we have set for where we'll spend with contracts is what we have listed as we continue to determine and capture where else we can save. I think we're going to continue to, even with the ceiling, we're going to continue to reduce as much as we can over the year so that we can reap those benefits in the next year.
I guess, just even last year, we had some disproportionate cuts to our community-based partners, which in the end, we leveled those out. And so I guess I'm still not hearing that. So say, for example, they took 10%. So do you have a list of those? So how are you going to get to the target of 3 million? And
yeah, I think I understand your question. So I have, thank you, Chief Adams here to speak. We actually had a conversation about the way and he'll engage in the process with a reduction of 15%. So I think you're correct in the fact that last year there was a reduction named, and then there was a complete add back, which was significantly impactful to the budget, as we needed to find where to pull those funds from. So
yeah.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to note that the total reduction for ResJ contracts out of the amounts that have been named is just not just, but it's 1.1 million. So I can't speak to these other buckets that you're talking about because I don't have those contracts under my purview. What our intention is to not have disproportionate cuts and to work with each of the community-based organizations to work on a scope of work so that students still receive some services.
Maybe what I'm looking for, and maybe this is a offline conversation between now and adoption, is just how that will be transparent. I mean, I don't feel comfortable voting for something, then like it's just going to be whatever gets decided. Because some of the cuts are, for example, personal service contracts. I'm looking at this just general list. It's $3.4 million. And we all probably will feel differently about, what that might be. So I'm more, I guess, if you can't say what it is like, what is the process by which that will be transparent? So at the end of the day, how you get to $3.4 million in cuts, what's included in that? And like I said the same question about professional development, which was several, 2.2 million, and then there's out of almost $1 million of out-of-state travel.
I think one of the examples that I can share looking at professional development, I know one of the shifts was the purchase of food or even just coffee, which you would be surprised how much that is to provide for educators on a full day professional development session, right? Significant to have it and significant in cost. And so that was reduced. So I think what I hear, you're asking for a line item by office of all of the reductions that were cut, because it's things like that, right? Where it could be an actual person that provided training or support, and that's reduced down by maybe weeks or days, to eliminating the coffee cart, or other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I've seen those price for the coffee service, and it's shockingly expensive.
We don't want our teachers uncaffeinated, though.
No.
I mean,
you would
can
not believe
imagine?
how expensive it is. I mean,
It's expensive.
but I guess I do want to see that, because actually I think that builds trust and credibility in the district of people see what's happening in our schools, and those cuts are real. And then it becomes like, well, like the central office didn't take any cuts, or what happened there? And I think from my standpoint, when people understand that things have been prioritized, they can see transparently what happened. I think two things happen. They have a better understanding that the cuts are real. It's not just being foisted off on the schools. The second thing is, I also think it creates a collective spirit around what we need to do in terms of school funding, and actually looking at how we prioritize things. So yes, that is what I'm
looking for. Okay.
Looking
so
for.
we can rally around that and appropriately respond.
So then, this is before the budget adoption. I asked for the board office budget, which we don't have. I don't need it tonight, obviously, but to see what the board office budget. And I would expect the board, it's not a lot of money, but to be taking a corresponding cut in travel. This is a kind of a detailed question, but question number 23 around other instructional, professional, technical services, it's $3 million, and it looks like it's just a discretionary fund. And when I asked about what it was, the answer wasn't very specific.
Are you on volume 1 and page what?
No, I'm on my questions.
Oh.
Question 23.
Oh, question 23. Okay.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Version 2. So that's something for the adoption. And then question 26 was more, I was trying to understand how many FTE we actually are reducing, whether it was 240 or my follow-up question, 240 or 270. And then whichever, like what the actual total was, and then just confirming that 157 of those are teachers.
Thank you. My team is helping me out right now. They're getting me right to that space in the 30 pages of questions and responses. So for the FTE question, I think one of the challenges in responding to the reduction in FTE was, what were we reducing from? Were we reducing from the adopted budget or the current year actuals? And so I think that's where it got a little bit unhinged and difficult to say what are the reductions, because as we mentioned earlier, the budget is the highest level of spending, and as positions are filled or not filled or new student needs arrive, we make some different choices throughout the year. That's managing those services. So I think in the responses, we did have a table that shows exactly what was in the proposed budget and what our actuals were in FTE is April, and then kind of what the difference was there. So because we had more FTE in April than what was in the proposed budget, whether we converted discretionary funds or there were other things that created that higher number of FTE for us, then the budget reduction seemed larger, because that was a higher number than when we adopted the budget from the prior year. So again, just reminding everyone that there's a little bit of this going on and that the budget is a guideline. So I know that that is in the responses. I just saw it a few minutes ago. Does that help answer your question?
So let's pick one of the like from the actual. How many individuals had their position cuts?
That's a different question. Like FTE, here's why I say that, Director Brim Edwards. We could say we reduced one FTE. That could be 2 half-time staff members. So FTE and people don't always equal the same exact number.
Okay, I could ask it any, it's not a trick question. I'm just trying to figure out like what got reduced. Maybe a better way to ask is like how many positions were eliminated? Positions eliminated, not because I know because of people not being, if they're not laid off and they get another position, they actually haven't left. But how many positions were reduced?
So across various areas, we had a reduction from current FTE, which again, it doesn't necessarily crosswalk exactly to positions, was a total of, I want to say, it's a long answer for you. And it did include some vacancies as well, so positions that were in our budget that hadn't been filled. So we have for fiscal year 26, the district has reported an approximate reduction, again, depending on the day of the week that we pull the report, of 240 FTE based on actual filled positions and vacancies, while the proposed budget reflects a reduction of about 270 FTE compared to a current year staffing snapshot.
Because you're saying actually there were more FTE last year than were budgeted because, say, non-position funds were converted into FTE.
That was part of it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let's say 240. And then, Dr. Adams, on your like heat map of all the schools, it had 157 teachers.
As of that date, as of the watermark, yes.
Okay. So can you do the math from is it appropriate to do the math from 240 to 150 minus 157 to get how many are non-teacher reductions? Or is that not a linear equation?
I'm trying to make sure I heard you and I'm just processing.
If there are 240 positions
right.
reduced and 157 of those were teachers, then the remainder 83 are non-teaching staff, approximately.
That's my understanding.
Okay. That's just what I was trying to get at with that question. Thank you. And that would be central office, represented, non-represented, everything else.
Yeah, across the board.
I also asked a question about whether any contracting out was assumed, and the answer I think that I received was, I would translate it into a yes, but I asked whether that was actually.
By contracting out, are you referring to, I heard quite a bit about the print shop services. So is that what you mean by contracting out?
Well, any service that currently is provided by a district employee being done by a non-district employee. I mean, the print shop could be an example, but there's any number of other things that could be contracting out. And the answer that I got seemed to imply that the answer would be yes, potentially.
Well, I think transportation services is a good example of where we are currently contracting out bus drivers, and we will continue to do that. We're in the middle of an agreement with them, our providers. There's not been any suggestions to my team in terms of contracting out additional services that we would already provide staff to. I can say that if it's a position that's very hard to fill, but that's what our students need, then there is a potential, whether it's a school nurse or, to fill that gap while that vacancy is being posted. There might be potential just to meet the needs of the students, but it's not the intention for us to contract out any labor positions at this time.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Let's break it up a little bit.
Pardon?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
On that topic. I'm curious what we had some discussion about the printing. The print shop, is that what it was called? Has that changed at all? Because I know we're talking about contracting that out, which has been more expensive than having it
It hasn't changed. I would love the opportunity to share the information verbally, which was shared in the Q&A that was provided. So we went back and did our research, and when you're reading the budget document for the line item for print shop services, it does appear that there's a significant change there. But when we compare all of the categories of the print shop cost, projected versus actual, we're looking at just under $500,000 in projected savings for our current arrangement. And I know that we're working hard with another school district partner to create even more savings and keep those tax dollars in our school system. So that's, really thoughtful and deliberate, although it doesn't read directly across on a single line item within our budget document. So that information was provided on page 10 of the Q&A.
It's question number 35. Although, it's interesting because that response has generated more mail than almost any other item from school people about how actually the district numbers, some people feel like there was like paper was paid for was different things, and staff time. I mean, it was interesting because a lot of people had a lot of feelings about the print shop and the value it provided. I'm curious about the last thing you said, because I did hear that PPS is looking to contract with Hillsborough School District to do printing, which kind of makes me sad that we don't have our own printing, that we're going to a different school district. How is it that they can provide printing cheaper than?
They have procured equipment that enables them to they do a lot of intergovernmental printing, like for the city and the county, Washington County, and they just have the ability to do the staffing and provide the online ordering platform. I don't know why that happened in Hillsborough and it didn't happen in PPS. I wasn't here at that time, but that district has a real enterprise way of looking at providing those services with the eye on keeping those dollars within our school systems and not necessarily farming them out to a private provider.
I have a comment about that. Sometimes with local governments, they have these like cooperative purchasing agreements, and so you're not just contracting for your own entity, you're going in on services, and it sounds like Hillsborough's doing what I call a McDonaldization, where they grow their own potatoes and they source as much internally as possible. It just sounds like they have a completely different business model.
They do, and we can provide additional information. I know that the agreement is under development right now. I haven't seen it. I'm not directly involved with it. But I do know that the intent is to save dollars and still provide great service to schools. So I'm sorry to hear that the feedback has not been positive this year.
It's good that we're keeping the dollars in Oregon.
Well, actually, it's just our former employees working at Hillsborough. So I asked about this earlier, but the budget doesn't have any clear place in the budget that there's funds for the Center for Black Student Excellence, and if we're going to be getting a potential lease, it's concerning if there's nothing in the budget to support us owning a building, and I'm assuming some sort of operating.
I think we're in the process of developing that currently. I know that we are planning to support a coordinator for those services, but I think that, again, that plan may not be as final as we would like it to be at this date for you. Are you thinking about the operating costs of the building, like utilities and custodial?
I mean, I looked at the initial plan, and there was a lot of dependency on dependency on PPS providing a whole host of suite of services. And maybe that's not contemplated, but that's what the former employee or the former director had in. So it would concern me that we were getting a building and we don't have anything in the budget that indicates that we have the funds to operate it. But maybe before adoption, because I think is adoption on the 10th as well?
Yeah, it is, and I'm not sure that we would have that level of detail. I think what we've talked about as a team is that we need to first be in some sort of purchasing contract with the builder to understand what all the costs would be to operate, maintain, and protect our asset. And so I think we're seeing that as the next step while we're in conversation and thinking about the way in which we may go about it. Until we know exactly what we're dealing with in terms of operating costs and maintenance and utilities and all of that, we have to identify the site first. Yeah. And I only say that because
wouldn't we do that though before we make an offer on a building to know what it costs to maintain it or what the services?
Well, this might be getting too far in the weeds, but
it's never too far in the weeds for me.
Oh, okay. So, it could be, let's give a sample scenario where we purchase a building that has the opportunity for us to have lease agreements, and we're able to receive some funds there that can cover the operating costs, right? So that the building is self-supporting. And so that is something that we're hoping, and that's of high interest to us, because we know that we have funds declining due to enrollment and just increased operating costs. And so that are things that we'll factor in when preparing to present information to the board on a purchase.
So that's why we don't see anything in the budget other than the position of the director?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. I've raised it several times about the issues with the Southeast Guiding Coalition schools. So purposely, the district said that they would have 10 FTE for balancing for 5 years because of the tail of the boundary changes, program closures, program moves, and the decision was made not to put those 10 in. And so the answer was, if schools community asked for the resources, they would get them. So I would just ask to understand, I don't have to have it now, but understand what those school community asked for and what, if anything, they got. And I know in the past, not all the 10 FTEs were distributed. So it wasn't that they had to be distributed, but they were sort of available in a pool. So I'd like that before adoption, just to understand what was asked for. Also, no, what happened this year? Because what I was told when I was asked is like, no, we didn't set aside 10, but those schools could ask for FTE and it would be considered as part of the process. And so my question is, did any of them ask for FTE and did they get it?
Got it.
Does that make sense?
All right. Chief Franco, are you prepared to answer that now?
I don't need it. You
Okay.
can just send it to me.
Okay, perfect.
And I say, in the past years, it wasn't always the full 10, so it's not a wrong answer if it's not the full 10, but I would want to know.
Sure.
Did a community meeting ever happen with any of those school communities? Because I was told that would happen.
A community meeting this year?
Mhm.
Yes.
Your team said that, when I asked whether there's been any engagement with the school communities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just pull Chief Franco forward. We're asking about community engagement.
With the Southeast Guiding Coalition schools, primarily the ones that were most impacted, the Marysvilles, the Bridgers, the Lents,
Yeah.
Harrison Park.
Yeah, so sorry. Hey, everybody. So from a community engagement perspective, not necessarily community, but we did engage principals. This is very similar to the process that we did last year. I'd say the difference, and you said it right at the very end there, is that even though we don't have the specific 10 set aside, that bucket, they were allowed and permitted to engage in our process of requesting set aside. And so it is a smaller amount, and so we really have to go through, and we do look specifically in whether or not they are set aside school, and if they're requesting, we do look at that. And so when we allocate, it's really in the spring, it's really about technical adjustments to see, and we try to stay true overarchingly to the bridge and program and those types of things.
I'm sorry, did you say that you have distributed some? And I know in the past, sometimes it was like a 0.2 or.
Yeah, we have. So we've done a few spring rebalancing already. So we've done 2. We're actually going to look again this Thursday, because one of the things that we talked about as a cabinet with Dr. Armstrong is let's see what we could do to get it right before the fall. And we are looking at really what are the technical pieces, but then too, you know, we sent out online verification opportunities via Synergy. That's a new avenue platform that we really haven't pushed forward, but now we are, to see where's our enrollment, as opposed to just looking at PSU's projections, so that we can get it right before the fall. I know that was a big piece from schools.
Can I just pause on that, because I really want to underscore that. So one of the things that we heard from educators is how difficult it is to be in buildings not balanced and then have to move or have classes collapse after the school year has started. And so I just want to underscore, because I think this is an important thing to note, is that not only did we add in additional reviews, because, you know, prior to this year, it was the allocation of staffing, maybe for some of those unique situations, there was an allocation, but the rest of it was waiting until fall enrollment and sometimes October. So as Chief Franco mentioned, there'll be a 3rd review, because what we committed to our schools is that if there are extra efforts for enrollment or the numbers that we're sharing isn't matching their reality, that we would commit to review that so that we can make sure we're getting staffing as right as possible, because I think we've missed the mark in many places over the last couple of years. And then also the other point is the families having the opportunity to confirm enrollment in the fall, which would help our schools with low enrollment to be able to show their numbers and use that as evidence of why, you know, maybe that extra 2nd grade class should be funded because of, you know, spike in enrollment or something like that. So I wanted to just underscore that, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I guess I'm specifically speaking to the Southeast Guiding Coalition schools, and primarily the ones that had the biggest impact. And frankly, one of the issues of just talking to the principals is most of the principals have changed, or many of the principals have changed. So they weren't even here during the whole process, but the parents still remember and, you know, feel the impact of the boundary changes, program closures, programs moving. I hope we're continuing to communicate with the whole school community, because I really feel like the district made a promise, and it was a challenging time. Thank you. So you're going to get me whatever the increments as of whatever
what we have.
whatever point in time. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I think the appropriate response then, if parents are asking us about that, is they should talk to their principal. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything I think is first with the principal.
Okay. And the Arts Pathway School, the link's not in here, so it'd be great to get that. There's a pending response on the salaries for the new salary schedule, so I'd appreciate that. And the last question I think I had was answered in the superintendent, this is a great way to close, was answered in the superintendent's opening, which was the Title I funds. I was asking about what we're doing with that, because that's just a huge amount of money. And so is it that we know that the federal government's going to give us the money, or how is it that we know that we will have it? I'm just suspicious. not of the district, but of like the federal government.
Yes, I think I can take a shot at answering that, and I know that I have our chief financial officer to help keep me in line. But at the federal level, as in most places, they plan budgets a year early. So actually, the title budget was adopted at the federal level several months ago, is what we were told. And what we were waiting for was to make sure that there were some protections there so that there wouldn't be any surprise pullbacks and whatnot. And so what I've heard from some individuals is that it would actually be illegal for them to do that, and all of the considerations that they're making now are those considerations for the 26-27 school year. Now, one of the things that we needed to also wait for was the distribution from the Oregon Department of Education, where there are some districts out there that will receive a lesser amount, but it's because of the change in demographics and the decrease in enrollment. That's not our situation with the change in demographics, but that is the reality for some folks. And so knowing that those funds will be now released to ODE, everyone is moving forward with the distribution of those resources, while still now thinking about what may come forward in 26-27. I see Chief Bionald. Is there anything you want to add to that? Nope. Okay. So that's the short
Great.
answer.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. And I want to thank the rest of the board for your patience while I work through the questions, because I was going to be just an abstain, and I think I'm like a lot of my questions got answered, and I think, or I'm expecting answers. I really am just going back to the very first questions about the contracts, the professional development, and the out-of-state travel. I'll just follow up with the superintendent and Chief Morrison about just like what that process would look like. Because again, I think it builds trust in the district and credibility that, like, yes, the things that we said are going to happen it's not just happening at your school, it's happening across the board.
Thank you, Dr. Beth-Mowers. Those are a lot of good questions. I'm glad that you asked them. I'm a little sad that we didn't end on Director Sullivan's wonderful speech, so I was wondering if you could have another close for us before we put this up for a vote.
Do a grand finale at the adoption since we're just accepting.
All right.
Can I just make a quick comment? I think, but I'm not positive, I've heard multiple of us talk about how excited we are about the return of the Title I funds. And I think we've all been saying that we hope those are focused on staffing and in classrooms. So I just wanted to tie that in a bow.
Yeah, well, and so our title funds they're not decisions that we're making in central office. The title funds are sent to schools, and then the principals, based on their programming and the needs and the reason why those funds are even in place for the demographic of students that it's meant to support, make those decisions locally. So we, distribute, monitor, support, but the decision is local.
So it's kind of like akin to the equity funds, in a way, in that sense? Some schools get equity funds and they get to decide how to use them. The same goes for Title I.
There are parameters based on their school improvement plan, how they got to be identified, how are they working on parent and family involvement, what about professional development, and then you can use it for staffing.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that added information that I didn't know.
Great, thank you for that. All right. Assuming there's no further questions.
Actually, can I make one last comment? This is just a comment, but there's been a lot of talk about a ceiling and about a ceiling. Like, we're setting ceilings for the funds, and in the past, generally, it's like the board is setting like intent, and so, Christy, when you said, or, I'm sorry, Director Split, then like thinking it's going to Title I, so it's, from my perspective, when the board votes on something, there is usually like board intent versus not just versus ceiling. And so I wouldn't want to lose it, and like, all we're doing is just setting the ceiling, and anything below the ceiling is okay, because I do think there's board intent, and we certainly hear when things happen that seem contrary to what seemed to be the board intent.
Great, thank you for that clarification. All right, the board will now vote on Resolution 7116, Budget Committee approval of the 2025-26 budget and the imposition of property taxes. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. All opposed? Abstentions? All right, Resolution 7116 is approved by a vote of 5-0. Thank you, everyone, for your patience, and we're happy to be done before 9. So the Budget Committee is now adjourned.
Thank you.